Hey, Andy. How's it
How are you?
going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I mean, whatever. We're chuckling even as we get on this thing. But I mean, I got the input from Dale Chu. He's like, dude, I actually kind of like you and Andy, but you need some theme music. What's going on? So, you
Okay,
got any
I'm going to
ideas?
see him this week. What did Dale recommend? What was his suggestion for us?
All he said was just, you guys are pretty good, but like, it's pretty jarring to start from nothing, and it just doesn't bespeak, seriousness. So I've been starting to think about,
We scream seriousness.
getting AI, to like mash together, incompatible, music. I mean, ask it for the combination of Rage Against the Machine and, Brahms' Second Concerto or something like that. You could represent the Brahms, I could represent, the Rage Against the Machine, but I don't know. Maybe you got other
I
ideas.
want like Moon Age Daydream or Voodoo Child, something like that would be fantastic. I think that would fit us a little bit better.
As long as it was played in a Muzak version, or something like something you hear on an elevator. No.
I guess I mean, if I would actually be okay with it, we just got some really cheesy porno jazz. That would be funny at least. But if we could somehow get Hendrix, that would be amazing. Obviously.
All right. Can you work on the rights to that? Maybe Bellwether can like swing that for us.
All the big money this podcast is throwing off for us. Yeah. We're getting lots of feedback. I heard somebody say the other day how strong your mic sounds now. The audio is better, which made me immediately, unfortunately, think of Trump in Pennsylvania. And that one day I'm going to be like telling people, all the other podcasters said Jed Wallace's mic. You should have heard it. It was so strong the way he. Sorry, Mama Slap seems like a poor Bobby Kennedy. I don't know why that's not how Trump talks, but I certainly don't have a Trump. I don't have a Trump impression to do.
Is that what the podcasters are talking about in the shower?
Exactly. They're talking about your mic has gotten really strong and our sound quality is better. So it makes sense that we would then segue into having some actual intro music.
I like it. All right. Well, I know you got other stuff going on this week around elections and whatever. It doesn't seem like we can get started without at least starting there, and whatever, you're going to be sharing other stuff. I don't know if you got so much content you can, keep it fresh across several podcasts here, but what are you thinking here?
I don't know. And look, whenever we talk about, I always want to be transparent. And I used to say like who I would vote. I've actually already voted. And I wish there was like, after you vote, there was some list you could get onto, so you would stop getting the texts and pleas for money and everything else. And you could be like, I opt out. Like for me, it's game over. So I voted for Harris, obviously. But I feel like it's important to say we're not just like out here, like, somehow like independently handicapping this. But look, everyone wants to say the race. I don't think anyone, I wrote the other day on EduWonk, like everybody making predictions, I'm pretty sure figures they've got a 50% chance of being right because it's a two-person race. Yeah. And they've got like a 75% chance that everybody will forget their prediction in the first place. And so that, because like, it seems very, very tight. And, I talk to different people and political people in Pennsylvania, you get different takes on what they think is going to happen. I think if you're a Democrat and you want something to worry about, you should worry that she's not ahead. Like not substantially, it's a pretty divided country, but that she should be given the context of everything, both favorable sort of tailwinds for her and what you would think would be pretty substantial headwinds for her opponent. Like she ought to be, in a more comfortable place. And so that's reason of concern. And then I guess with the Republicans, if they're a Republican, you want to worry. She still has time to close the deal. She clearly has not yet, but sometimes these elections shift hard and the conventional wisdom just doesn't apply in this case. Because like, you're like, oh, it always shifts against the incumbent party. Well, in this situation, who really is the incumbent party? And there's like, I think if she could land some sort of clear, convincing messages about what she's going to do, I think she could still seal the deal.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to vote for Harris as well. And I'm not a happy Harris voter. And it's just, there's some things I kind of feel are disqualifying. And I just feel like January 6th is fundamentally disqualifying. We can talk about other things that are disqualifying as well. But I actually think the worst public policy decision of my lifetime is the Iraq War, and I swore that I would never vote for somebody who voted for the resolution, and I never did. And I actually think that the Iraq War is what just fractured the Republican Party and has ultimately led to us having Trump. But I don't like it. I just feel like I'm not happy with, certainly not happy with the education policies, of Biden and Harris and whatever. Voting within the Democratic blob within the state of California is just so distasteful. So I'll try to find as many ways as I can within on my California ballot to like signal, hey, I want something different than Democratic Party basically mono control of the entire state here, as I think the Dems are really driving the state into a state of dysfunction.
Yeah, it's weird. You said a couple of interesting things there. One is, look, I mean, I agree with you. To me, the pre-January 6th conversation about Trump, the post-January 6th, I mean, he did plenty of things. I didn't vote for him in 2020 or 2016 either. He did plenty of things I found offensive, but that like was a different level. And so I feel like we have to have that conversation with that in mind, that people talk about choices people made after 2016, people who decided to go into the administration or did this or that. It was January 2017 was a different time than post January 2021. I think that sometimes gets lost. The other thing you said, look, I will say one of the nice things, something that to Trump's credit, he said he wasn't going to get us any wars, and he didn't. And some of that stuff a leader can't control, obviously. Things happen on your watch that you can't control. But per the your post Iraq comment, it's one of the interesting factors about the realignment of the parties. It's kind of an interesting thing. And then the other thing you said, the blob. Like, I just think this is one of these hidden in plain sight things. In a couple of ways. One, it's such a weird thing right now how we talk about politics. Like, I voted for Harris and Walz despite my concerns about some of their positions, particularly on education. But everybody assumes that everybody else votes for a candidate based on like the worst thing about them. And I think it's created just an incredibly toxic discourse in the education sector, because it's like all these things that like everybody recognizes like their own bias and doesn't realize that everybody else probably has a similar one. Like, some of the people who are voting for Trump are certainly not voting for him because of the most like revolting things about him. And I think it's a problem we've come into in this sector where people are like, I run constantly into these people. I can't imagine anyone voting for Trump. Like, I can imagine that. To me, that's not even a very hard thought exercise. I handicap the issues and his positions and things he has said and done and so forth differently. But like this idea that it's like unimaginable, like, no, and I think that if there's a problem with the Democratic message, it may be that. It may be that it's oriented towards it's unimaginable to vote for this person rather than it's imaginable and we need to persuade you in a different way. That may be alienating people. And then the last thing, look, the blob, man, like, she's a creature of California Democratic politics. This is really her first time out harvesting national votes like this. And if you sort of, I think, want to get some clues into how she operates and so forth, it's look at politicians who have come up in that Democratic machine and what that looks like. I think that's actually will reveal quite a bit about sort of how to think about, what to expect and so forth and what we should expect on education.
Yeah, it's interesting to see Gavin just having basically lock, stock, and barrel in the early years of his administration, going far, far left, trying to keep the teachers unions, the other public employee unions, the other far, left aspects of the coalition together. And then, he's in his last 2 years. He doesn't need anybody anymore. And it just feels like he's repositioning himself to try and be more centric. So whatever he does in the future, at least he'll have something else to refer to other than, what he did in these first 4 to 6 years as being governor.
Yeah, and look, Trump has broken the rules of politics, right? There's no Tim Russert anymore, and so I think you realize politicians are sort of behaving a little more like, politics is always sort of situational, opportunistic, all of that, but it's happening at a different level, and I think it's because people realize there's so much noise in the issue environment and so forth, and so much chaos that like you can do that, and Gavin may very well be able to get away with that.
Yeah, we'll see. We had a Charter Folk board meeting on Friday. Really interesting conversation. Jay Artis Wright from the Freedom Coalition was on. And one of her comments during the board meeting was, we just have to have people talk about education a little bit. And I thought it was an interesting, whatever. You and I have talked about it before, just how mostly education is off the radar screen altogether. But Jay really brought it home, and she's going to write something at Charterfolk in this week as well on this topic. But
Right.
if there's very little about education at the top, if anything, at the top of the ticket. There's some interesting state ballot initiatives in Kentucky, in Colorado, a couple other places around school choice and these things. There's elections that are happening in Chicago with the dysfunction with Brandon Johnson with the new school board there. So there are certainly some elections that are going to have big bearing on education issues. Anything that you're tracking above others as it relates to education?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Jed. One thing that I am with education that I am thinking about is like, you're right, it's not an issue, but it really is a factor in the election. It's really fascinating in these closing days that, Harris is trying to run up her margins with white college educated voters, because that could be a differentiator. And Trump's trying to run up his margin with non-white voters. And education level is turning out to be highly predictive of voting behavior. It has been the last few cycles. Geography and education have taken on a greater role, but it seems even more so with the sort of these shifting coalitions within the parties. So there's that. I'm also watching the school choice ballot referendum. Yeah. Like you all in California. I live in Virginia. Our ballot's like pretty simple. Like this year we have like a U.S. Senate race, your House race, and the presidential. And there's one ballot issue that was pretty straightforward. We don't get a ton. It's hard to get a constitutional amendment on the ballot. Colorado's like you all, where like voters get this like phone book to go through. And one of them is this sort of innocuous sounding create a right to school choice. I think Kentucky has one of these as well. And the way it's worded, it seems extremely innocuous. So if you're like wading through all of these things you have to think about as a voter there, it could be very easy just to be like, oh, what is this? It sounds like parents have a right to direct. It sounds like it's basically like codifying the Pierce decision of, almost 100 years ago at the Supreme Court. It doesn't sound like it's particularly revolutionary. And so I'm watching that one. I mean, obviously, look, if it passes, it'll immediately be challenged. These things always, end up wending their way through the courts. But that one seems really interesting. Just in terms of, is there a new sort of softer strategy that we might see around these things? It can't be by accident that sort of similar approach on multiple state ballots.
Yeah, Colorado is interesting in that we're really testing some school choice stuff in a purple, but mostly blue context. It's shifted enough now. And so it's interesting to see the dynamics there, because that was really driven by the voucher and ESA people. And they kind of threw a bone into the charter school people saying, hey, you'll benefit from this too. But the charter school people are like, what are we really going to get out of this? Not very much. And so I don't think the charter school world has gone all in as maybe the ESA and voucher people would have expected. What I think longer term is, hey, if you're in red context and you're going to do something different, I don't know. But outside of those contexts, if the ESA and voucher people are going to come and expect charters to be a part of the coalition, there's got to be something tangible that's going to make things, better for charter people. And in Colorado, there are all sorts of things that they could have done. One of the things I think is, and Starley has been out of the gate strong on this in her early months at the National Alliance.
That's Starley, the new head of the National Alliance of Public Charter Schools.
Yeah, she's really talking about the problems with flexibility, autonomy, freedom. And I'm starting to become of the opinion that we need much stronger structural barriers to re-regulation in charter land, such that you need it in your constitution. Hey, if you want to re-regulate charter schools, you need to have 2/3 of the legislature vote for it, or there needs to be a 2-part process, or you need to vote on it, 2 years in a row, or something that's just a higher bar, so that we don't see charter schools run the same trajectory that all the rest of public education is run, which is toward being just overly hidebound.
Yeah, it's a weird thing though, right? Like, I agree with your, and obviously what's going to happen, and this will be something to be vigilant about with the Harris administration, is there'll be pressure on to, under the guise of sensible regulations for charter schools. It'll be a bunch of stuff that is designed to, cause problems, hamstring growth, and all the rest. And it'll be, well, how can you be against this stuff and all that? We've seen that debate and playbook before. It's both tired and effective. But what's interesting is that's all happening. This push, you're right, for all this regulation at the same time that on some of the core stuff like measurement, accountability, communicating clearly with parents about performance, that's all going out the window, right? And so like you got these two sort of very disjointed pressures happening like basically at the same time. And the ed reform movement, that's, I can tell, has sort of fallen under the sway of this idea that like test scores are pretty useless, accountability is, you know, yesterday's news, you don't need this stuff. And okay, maybe, but the problem is there's certainly no alternative vision to replace it. There's no positive looking,
right.
You know, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. We're going to do, you know, some other mechanism. And historically, testing, you know, really smart testing critics, like I would like say, like Ted Sizer would be a good example of that. You know, just you know, incredibly wise and thoughtful about it. He was like, oh yeah, that's why you have to let parents choose. You're not going to have tests, but then you got to let parents like have just a lot of choice. They can express their preferences that way. Like he was very thoughtful and had a vision that was intellectually consistent, focused on equity, all the things you would want. And we don't have that now. We just have none of these measures matter. And so it's just going to further this sort of vacuum we're in. And it's, again, it's just interesting relative to this, on these other things, we've got this push to like re-regulate as fast as we possibly can.
Yeah, I think that we in Charterland have been too associated with the sunset the test crowd, with the kind of the naive belief that if we get rid of this testing, we're going to get rid of some unfair decision making being made against us.
Right.
But I think it's actually the exact opposite of that. When there is no objective data whatsoever, it basically makes every renewal decision a subjective one, a political one, and when people are motivated to turn us down or to deny us, to have no objective data in the landscape to build our argument around is going to be terrible. And the other thing too is that, like, look at Credo's report here just, you know, a couple of years ago. I mean, that is one of the most important stories for charter schools ever. And this PPI study that shows that charter schools, you know, where we have cities where 33% or more of the students are served by charter schools, all 10 of them, gaps decreasing and votes rising. This is based on data. If we don't have that data, how the heck do we start telling these incredible stories?
Right. Well, also, and Parker Baxter's new study in Denver, talked about as well, which is very, you know, student level data. The PPI study I thought was great. I should, like, as a disclosure, I'm a senior fellow there. I used to work there full time. The president of PPI, Will Marshall, he's like the lead guitarist in my wife's band. So there is like a lot of there's a lot of conflicts.
Hey, theme music. Ask him for the PPI.
There we go. Though he's like, honestly, I'm scared to ask. He's really into Steely Dan, and I don't know if I could have Steely Dan theme music for our podcast. But we'll see. Anyway, it's a great study. I mean, there is a basic correlation causation thing with it that they can't control for. But I do think what it clearly shows, and it hasn't gotten enough attention, is the argument was if you had lots of public school choice and charters, it was going to be bad for everybody. And I think you can clearly, like, all the districts that Will and Tressa looked at in that study, they are like all have substantial market share of charters, and bad things haven't happened. Good things have happened. So you certainly, even accounting for the correlation causation, why did the good things happen? You can't argue that like having a bunch of charter schools means like a bunch of bad things. And then Parker's study, we can even talk about the substance. The effect sizes are actually unusual for our sector. There's some fascinating
for
stuff.
Sure.
We'll put all this stuff in the show notes. Or we can talk about the politics of it, because what is fascinating to me, I mean, the findings are compelling. Parker did a study a few years ago that you couldn't control for certain things. The school district fought with him about getting student level data. He was finally able to get it. I think I have this right on a like just a one vote majority on the board. Like they had to fight for it. It's just crazy to get data, to get information. And this isn't like about students. This is anonymized, just data, just information that a researcher could use. I think probably because they knew what it was going to show. And it shows that like the reforms that have been in place for a while. So, you know, Michael Bennett, Tom Boasberg, Susanna Cordova, like just all like fantastic school leaders, that those reforms had a big impact on student achievement. And a big positive impact. And that's after all the blood that was spilled in Colorado around politics for this, and people almost like now kind of throwing in the towel, which is like another one of these cases where we don't wait till we get the results and people give up. But here's the thing with Parker's study. Like, that's really substantial information about one particular place, and yet it's gotten almost no attention in the media outside of Colorado, relatively little there, and it certainly hasn't like at an elite level in the sector. And you would think, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I would think if, like, let's say like in LA or Sacramento where you are, like a study came out that there was some intervention and suddenly, like, cancer rates, incidence of breast cancer, incidence of asthma or diabetes had just like gone off a cliff, suddenly just declined precipitously because of some intervention that the local government had decided to do there. People would be like, get out there, figure out what's going on. How do we, like, there'd be a rush to like figure it out. And there's just so little interest. It's really remarkable.
I wonder if PPI is going to go back and try to make their own control group. Maybe that's something they could do. It's just, you can't, the correlation causation stuff, whatever, you're never going to get to it at the level that we would want. But where's the other side saying, hey, just leaving the status quo intact over the last 15 to 20 years, we've seen the same results in those 10 cities that these other 10 cities that have seen big charter school growth have. I'm not aware of Omaha nailing it. I'm not. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, right. I was agreeing with you.
I mean, I just, whatever. I don't, tell me what the great story is within, a traditional approach to things. And I don't think there is one anywhere. But the thing that
hang on, I will jump in here then, Jen. I do think it's also just a preponderance of the evidence kind of question. Like, you've got all the credo stuff, like you mentioned, which points in one direction and has changed. People still talk about credo, like the early findings. They don't talk about the continuation, the updated. They go from the original credo findings, and what credo has shown is just a steady increase in quality, a whole bunch of stuff. We'll put those in the show notes too. I mean, that's kind of old news, but apparently it hasn't penetrated. Then you've got all these various studies that come out in different ways. The PPI study showing, at least for certain, you can say there's not like huge harm being done. The study on Denver, you've got, like, you look at New Orleans where, they're doing substantially better than they were before the storm, to the point where people are sort of losing that in a relatively high level of improvement because the sort of differences year to year in improvement have slowed down because they made progress. And all these places, are they like, outstanding? Of course not, but they've made like real progress from, improving their overall performance. And so you can make a preponderance of the evidence case that, like, okay, if I'm a policymaker, I have to make a decision. Am I going to do this or not? There's a lot of evidence I should probably do this. And so I don't know that we have, you can't, if you always wait for the RCT, you can't, like, it limits the range of things you're going to be able to do. Policymaking is about making decisions by definition, basically on imperfect, incomplete information. It's not social science. It's policymaking. And I just think the evidence here is strong, and, it's frustrating that more people aren't challenged with the face of this, plus what you just described, like, against this backdrop and context. Why aren't we, what are we talking about here?
But I don't even think we ourselves talk about it in the right way. I put most of the blame on us. Yes, of course, the world is distracted, and yes, our adversaries are going to try and, play whataboutism or whatever. We won't even tell the story ourselves. Did you see in Denver that Denver Families and Rooted, two organizations I respect a great deal, by the way, and boards I agree with, and all that, but they decide to merge in the last week, and then they announce what their agenda is for the future, and it has no reference whatsoever to the great progress that's been made over the last 15 years, and it has no commitment to let's do even more. They're pivoting to let's focus on health and safety and academics. And I'm just like, if there's any place that should just unabashedly be like, we have made incredible progress, and our task now is to build on that, keep going with no apologies. But that's not what we do. And when our own advocacy organizations won't say the thing, how can we get mad at other people for not saying the thing?
I think that's fair. I mean, we talk some of this. I think there's some interesting stuff there. I have a couple of thoughts, but I do think we've done a bad job, of telling the story. And I think advocacy. Look, philanthropic dollars are drying up, so I think you're going to see a lot more of these sort of consolidations and mergers and acquisitions and so forth. And not just on advocacy, but in general, but particularly there, the dollars are drying up. People haven't learned the lessons. And it is, again, it's a little embarrassing to say, we're not going to focus on academics and improvement, right, in parallel with the study coming out. That, by the way, Boasberg and Michael Bennett, who's a U.S. senator now, wrote a accompanying paper for, like, saying, so people will also put in the show notes. And, that in the face of all that, to say we're not going to do this is certainly a little embarrassing. But one thing they said that I thought was interesting, they said, we're not going to be something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing the quote, we're not going to be disruptive, we're not just going to be showing up at school board meetings and so forth. And I feel like, okay, you and I have talked on this podcast about I think we have like two problems. You and I have talked about the people who, they just seem to want disruption for disruption's sake. They want acrimony. Right. They don't really care as much about better public schools as they do as like sticking it to the teachers unions, right? Like, yeah. So any disruption or acrimony is sort of an end in itself, not necessarily a means to an end in terms of education improvement. And I don't even mean like they think like we have to, like the teachers unions are in the way of education improvement. That's something I would agree with on a lot of counts. I just think they just don't like the teachers unions and they want them gone, and sort of irrespective of whatever that means for schools. So we've talked about those people. They're the theater. Maybe we should call them the theater kids. And then you've also got this other side now, which wants like no acrimony, no disruption, has sort of internalized this idea that any acrimony or disruption must be like our fault. Right. Rather than sometimes in politics, that's just like, that's how you get things done. That's what happens. And how to use it constructively and so forth. And so they're sort of saying out of the gate, we're just not going to do that. At least it's the quotes that I saw. There may be more to it, but what I saw, that I was like, well, it's hard to do advocacy if you sort of acquiesce on some of the core tools of advocacy, like right from the jump. Right. That's a problem. And by the way, the teachers unions don't do that. They never unilaterally disarm. On the contrary, everything is a constant debate, battle, negotiation. They never stop. And that's why they're good at what they do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuance to parse out here, because I think that you're right. Just cheap attacks for the sake of attacks, make the other side look like crap for that sake, is just without integrity, without vision, and in the long term, I think ultimately counterproductive. The question, but on the other hand, you'll have people that will say, "Hey, can we just like do the Rodney King thing and just all get along a little bit better? And hey, can we just agree that we don't care about governance model? All we want are great schools." Well, as soon as you start saying that, though, then the entire critique falls apart. And, this is where I think we have to get precise. And I do think, I don't think I'm some kind of genius or anything like that. I think sitting in that seat at CCSA for 10 years and realizing the things that I could say that I could only keep saying until Tuesday versus the next month versus the next year versus the things that I could actually keep saying for my entire duration of time. The things that I could keep saying, those are the places where we should stay anchored to. And they are ones where you say, look, parents don't care about governance model, for sure. But there's something about the design of the charter school world that allows educators to be more successful, and for a lot of the unfairnesses that we find in education to be addressed. And all we want is for a landscape such that all educators operate within that landscape. And it's not, and as soon as you say, oh, we just love all, schools, whether they're bad or good, then when you see these problems in Chicago, then you see these problems, in Denver, then you see these problems in St. Louis, in Milwaukee, all these different places. If you don't think that there's something wrong with the system, what must your criticism be? There must be something wrong with the people, And I just totally disagree with that. It's just that we're no better as people than they care about kids as much as we do. It's that we are operating within a healthier environment, and we should want that environment for all educators and for all kids.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you said an interesting thing I just want to double back on. You mentioned Rodney King. And this is a little bit of an aside, but I think it goes to this idea, like some of this is just generational. people like the advocacy fights of the 90s and the 2000s, like the current generation, they're not necessarily even like versed in those. They weren't there. And so we have to relearn some of these lessons. And the reason that it made me think of that is, I remember in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, you heard people saying nothing like this has ever happened before. This is going to change everything. And like, I was like, if you're of a certain age, you remember like the Rodney King episode was, I think, very salient for a lot of people, particularly at that time, young people who now sadly were older people, in terms of like just the issues around policing, the issues around racism in society. It was very formative. And likewise, it's roughly the same time, the OJ verdict, which again, shined a lot of light on sort of these very different perceptions of the justice system that exist across racial lines. And those were very formative experiences for a lot of people. But when this happened more recently, it was as if those things for a new generation hadn't happened, which, by the way, is not their fault. That's obviously every new generation, right? Has that. Yeah. But it's just interesting. I think we're seeing something of the same thing here, where the newer generation of leaders, and because there's been lots of intergenerational friction and whatever else, and it hasn't necessarily internalized kind of what worked, what didn't work, the lessons. There hasn't been sort of a good job of sort of transferring that knowledge and information. And that's a miss, because you want to essentially, when I mentor young leaders, I'm like, your role is to go out and make new mistakes, not replicate the ones that we made, right? Learn from ours. Don't make those again. Go make new ones. That's what progress is messy. That's what it looks like. And I think we've done a poor job of that, which something we've talked about in the past on this podcast, that even shows up in like CMO leadership transitions, which have often been pretty rough. There's just been a poor job of that overall.
Yes. And let me just stay in the advocacy world, just because that's where I feel like my data is freshest and my understanding is deepest. It's one thing to say, hey, we want a baton pass. We actually had some things figured out, and we've modeled and we've given you some ideas, and just take them. Oh, wait a second. You don't understand what the whole charter school thing is all about. Isn't that a shame? That's one scenario. The other scenario is we who went first didn't get it right. We weren't crisp. We were not courageous enough. That's what I really do think. Like Brandon Brown's piece that he wrote about Indianapolis, and then I followed up on that. And I know that post was just insufferably long, but Brandon and I talked about that, and it was just like, look, we want something in the landscape that tells the whole story from 1995 until 2024, and it'll stay fresh for the next 3 years. We don't have one. Just write it, Jed. Okay, but in there, Brandon was talking about in 2011, when the Mind Trust first came out with his ideas for Indianapolis and how the entire system was going to evolve and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it made things worse for 2 years. It was just really shrill. But then over time, when people saw the common sense of what they were proposing, it just and of course, there's ebbs and flows. It gets more controversial, less controversial. But I think a lot of our advocates, our intuition is, if we say anything that's controversial, the right thing to say in Denver right now is, well, we care about health, we care about safety, and we care about academics. Oh, yay. And everybody like congratulates you. And that's so great. But there's nothing that's there that's built to last, right? If you have a critique, so you're rewarded for saying that thing, and then the value of it dissipates over time. I feel like those of us that have done this before, we need to acknowledge we did it wrong, and we're handing things over to people, and we're saying, oh, it's intuitive what they're supposed to do, and we didn't do it ourselves. But however it is we get this theory articulated for the way going forward, there's nothing that's more important for us right now.
Yeah. No, that's a really smart point we should come back to. And I think it's also hard, and we can come back to another podcast. Look, everyone's just scared right now, and that's part of the problem. And it's making everybody timid, and there's lots of different reasons for that. But everyone's scared and nervous, and that's you can't lead like that. And you can't have impact like that.
But I think when you get data like this from PPI saying that we're 10 for 10, I think we should have a greater sense of confidence. Yes, if we say the thing right now, it's going to result in blowback. But when we generate results like this over the long term, it's going to get better. but we have to be able to surface, what our theory of action really is.
Yeah, no, I agree, and certainly can say the stuff that everybody says it's going to get worse. That's been disproven. Which, look, politicians are naturally risk averse, right? And so starting with, okay, it's not going to get worse. That's actually not a bad place because they don't want that to happen on their watch.
Yeah,
so it's actually not a bad place to start, and then be like, and here's this other evidence.
Yeah, and as it relates to this election right now, I wanted to make this point during our election discussion, but I think it fits right here. See what your thoughts are. There's a part of me that just wishes there was no election happening whatsoever. Not that I can be happy with the Biden status quo, not that I can be okay with the status quo in California or a lot of other places, but I just feel like right now, at least in Charterland, we figured out how to keep making decent progress. And in fact, I would say we're seeing some acceleration right now. And if conditions could just stay this way for another 5 years or for another 10 years, I think we would see a resumption of momentum in Charterland. But what I worry about is an election that just shakes the can again, such that we're all, reconsidering whether or not we're on the right side of history or whether we should be in some way doubting our partners and those kinds of things. Do you have any feelings along these lines, or am I just?
No, it's a great question, and I think another one of the weird things hidden in plain sight. I think there's this, again, there's sort of these casual narratives that take off. There's this assumption that, oh, Trump's a Republican, he's probably for choice. He's been, in the past, he's talked about choice, so he'll probably be good for charters, and Harris will be bad. And in fact, the evidence, if you take a look, if we have something coming out on this from Bellwether shortly, if you take a look, they've both been pretty bad on it, just in different ways. I mean, people forget Trump proposed to block grant the charter program to states, which, if you understand anything about how this stuff works and, at the state level and all that, that was a dreadful idea. He didn't actually do much. He certainly talked about choice more. If you're going to measure by rhetoric, he certainly talked about choice more than any president prior.
Yep.
But he did less on it substantively than Clinton, Bush, Obama, certainly. And, it's kind of a wash, frankly, with Biden. He didn't do anything.
Yeah.
To really push it, because, I mean, we don't need to, get into the litany of reasons why in terms of focus and everything else. But he did, for whatever reason, he didn't do anything on choice. Consequential. And so it's out there in plain sight. Neither of these outcomes are actually good for choice and charters, particularly for charters, which is why I think lots of people, I think there's probably relatively few national single issue charter voters, right? I'm a pretty big supporter of charter schools, as you know, but
sure,
obviously didn't factor into my vote. I think that's another one of these things, and it means how do you reset that? Because and people are looking at this as, well, one's better than the other. It's actually, they're both equally bad. And so if you're an advocate, you care about charters, you got to figure out, how do you navigate in that environment no matter what happens here coming up in November? And then second, how do we set the table differently, right? It's a little bit I used this analogy recently at a meeting. I'm not sure how well it worked, but it's like a restaurant, right? We're arguing over what should maybe be on the menu, and should it be fixed price or a la carte, whatever. We need to be eating in a different restaurant, right? All together. Right. Where the ground we're playing on the ground the charter opponents want us to be on, and that has to change.
I almost want to end it right there. All I want to do is say amen. I feel like on the other side of the election, what matters more than anything else is, do we just keep going? And are we going to just take pot shots at each other now? Or are we going to get crisper about what we're doing and more convicted within the realm that we actually have influence over in these other realms?
And people are going to have to come to the table. Let's end it. I mean, we can end it there, and we can come back after we have some, we'll come back in March when we have some idea of who the president is. Look, we can, everybody's going to have to get out of their fields. If Trump wins, center left reformers are going to have to say, we cannot just have another 4 years of nothing happening for kids. We've got to figure out how to move the ball forward, and can't hide behind this excuse that the only thing that's good for kids is saving our democracy. That's a slogan. We got to actually how do you get school improvement? And if Harris wins, like these folks on the right are going to have to get out of their fields that, oh my God, socialism's coming to America or whatever, and like figure out like, how do we push a agenda that is good for kids insofar as expanding opportunities for families and so forth is concerned in this context. And so everybody's gonna have to like, we can't keep just hopping from election to the next, making up excuses for why we're not getting anything done.
So I'll end it with a challenge to you, Andy. I am going to find theme music tackier than you will.
I believe you are up to that.
All right.
As long as it's not Steely Dan.
I like it. Great talking to you. Look forward to talking to you next month.
Yeah. Look, great to see you, Jen.
Take care.